Welcome back to the deep dive. We are really glad you are here with us today because, well, we are about to tackle a subject that, quite frankly, feels a bit like walking into a minefield.
That's one way of putting it.
We're sort of navigating the demilitarized zone between two superpowers that have been in a kind of cold war for the last, what, 300 or 400 years?
I think that's a pretty accurate analogy, actually. We're
Mm,
essentially looking at the library of human knowledge. And, you know, one whole wing is clearly labeled science,
right.
and the other wing is labeled spirituality. And usually there's this giant, thick, do not cross line painted on the floor right between them.
Exactly. It's like a high school cafeteria. You've got the lab coats on one side. It's
Hmm.
all cold. It's clinical. It's driven by hard data, mathematics, peer review, and, things you can smash together in a particle accelerator. It's the world of prove it.
And then on the other side of the room, you have the temple or the church or the meditation cushion. And that world is, it's warm, it's subjective, driven by faith, incense, ancient texts, personal experience. It's the world of feel it.
And the whole story we've been fed pretty much since the Enlightenment is that these two worlds are just fundamentally incompatible.
Oil and water.
Yeah, exactly. You either believe in the equation or you believe in the soul. And you can't really do both without, I don't know, crossing your fingers behind your back or just completely compartmentalizing your brain.
That is the prevailing worldview, yes. The standard division of labor is that science, it handles the how and the what of the material world, how the planets move, what an atom is actually made of,
The nuts and bolts.
the nuts and bolts. Meanwhile, spirituality gets to handle the why and the who. Why are we here?
Mm.
And who are we really? And
Yeah.
the big assumption is that never the twain shall meet.
But the stack of sources we're unpacking today, it just takes a sledgehammer to that dividing wall. We're looking at a document with this incredibly provocative title. Spirituality is not a vague concept.
Not a subtle title.
Not at all. And right out of the gate, it makes a claim that, honestly, it made me stop and clean my glasses to make sure I was reading it right.
It is a bold opening statement, to
That's-
say the least.
It's audacious. It doesn't say spirituality is nice or comforting or a good way to reduce stress. It says, and I want to get this quote exactly right, spirituality is actually clear mathematics that anyone can prove.
Which, to most modern ears, sounds like a complete and utter paradox.
It sounds like a category error. I mean, when I think of spirituality, I think of ineffable experiences, things you can't measure, things that defy logic by their very nature.
Right.
But this source is arguing that if you look at the hardest of the hard sciences, I mean, we're talking quantum physics, neuroscience, the stuff that wins Nobel Prizes, you don't end up disproving God or the soul.
No.
You actually end up somehow mathematically proving ancient spiritual truths.
And that really is the mission of this deep dive. We're not here to preach a sermon or, convert anyone. We're here to investigate a very specific, very personal question. Who am I?
The oldest question in the book.
It is. But what's so fascinating in these sources is that the answer given by ancient rishis, the sages of India sitting in caves thousands of years ago, and the answer being uncovered by modern theoretical physicists standing in front of chalkboards.
They're starting to look suspiciously identical.
They're converging. It's the ultimate convergence.
So we have a lot of ground to cover today to really do this justice. We're going to have to look at the double slit experiment, which is a piece of physics that is so weird, it literally keeps me up at night.
You and Einstein both.
Yeah.
It bothered him to no end because it fundamentally challenges our entire idea of a stable, objective reality.
We're also going to talk about Erwin Schrödinger, and not just his famous cat. We're going to find out why the father of quantum mechanics was so obsessed with Sanskrit scriptures and what he found in them.
A part of his life that is often conveniently left out of the textbooks.
We're going to look at the hard problem of consciousness that is currently driving neuroscientists completely up the wall. And somehow we're going to tie all of this back to the idea that you, the listener, might be something much, much vaster than you think you are.
Or perhaps the conclusion will be that science is finally building a telescope powerful enough to see what the spiritual masters saw with their eyes closed thousands of years ago.
I love that setup. Okay, so let's leave the shore and jump right into the deep end. We have to start with the physics. If we're going to make this claim that spirituality is clear math, we have to look at the math.
You have to.
The source material anchors everything on the observer effect and the double slit experiment. Now, most people have probably heard of this in passing, but I feel like we usually just skim over the implications because they're too, well, headache-inducing.
They are. They really are.
Can you break this down for us? What actually happens in this experiment?
It is, and this isn't an exaggeration. It's the experiment that kind of broke reality. To understand it, you have to visualize the setup. It's deceptively simple. Imagine a wall, and in that wall, you cut two vertical slits.
Okay.
Behind that wall, you place a detector screen. Think of it like a big piece of photographic film that will record where things hit it.
Got it.
Yeah.
A wall with two slits and a screen behind it.
Exactly. Now imagine you are holding a machine gun that fires marbles.
Okay, I'm with you. Physical objects, marbles, solid stuff.
If you just start firing those marbles at the wall with the two slits, some will bounce off the wall, obviously, but some will go through the slits.
Yeah.
If you look at that back screen later, what would you expect to see?
I mean, that seems pretty simple. I'd expect to see two vertical bands of impact marks. One band right behind the left slit and another one right behind the right slit, basically a shadow of the slits.
Exactly. That is how the physical world we know works. Matter travels in straight lines. If I throw a baseball through a window, it goes through that window.
Yeah.
It doesn't, turn into a cloud and go through all the windows at once.
Right. Simple cause and effect.
Now, here's where it gets weird. Let's shrink those marbles down to the size of electrons, these tiny subatomic particles. Scientists did this. They fired a stream of electrons at the two slits. But when they looked at the back screen,
They didn't see two bands.
they did not see two bands. They saw an interference pattern.
Okay, explain what an interference pattern looks like for those of us who may have skipped physics class.
Sure. Imagine you threw two stones into a perfectly calm pond at the exact same time. You'd get these ripples, these waves, radiating out from both splash points.
Right, you get two sets of circles expanding.
And when those ripples crash into each other, they interact.
Yeah.
In some places, the crests of the waves meet and they get bigger, they amplify. In other places, a crest meets a trough,
Yeah.
and they just cancel each other out. The result is this complex, striped pattern of high and low activity on the water. That is an interference pattern.
So on the screen, they saw a whole bunch of stripes, not just two bands.
Correct. They saw many, many bands of impact spreading out all across the screen, not just in two spots.
That's just bizarre. The scientists must have just scratched their heads. They're like, okay, electrons are matter, they're little bits of stuff, but they are behaving like waves.
Yes. That's the only way to get that pattern. The implication is that the electron isn't going through slit A or slit B. It's behaving like a wave and going through both slits at the very same time, interfering with itself, and then hitting the screen as a kind of probability wave.
Which is already weird enough. I mean, it suggests that matter isn't solid in the way that we think of it. It's more like a fluid, it's potential.
But here is where it gets really strange. This is where the spirituality, or at least the philosophical implications kick in, and where the purely materialist view starts to, crumble. The scientists were confused. They wanted to know how the electron was going through both slits. It just didn't make sense to them.
So they decided to peek.
They wanted to play Big Brother. They put a tiny little measuring device right next to the slits to see which one the electron actually passed through. They wanted to catch it in the act.
They wanted to observe the reality of the situation.
They did. And this is the plot twist.
I'm ready.
The moment they turned on that sensor, the behavior changed instantly. The electrons stopped acting like waves.
What?
They went back to behaving like little solid marbles. They went through one slit or the other. The interference pattern completely vanished, and on the back screen, they got just two bands.
Wait, pause there. Let's really let that sink in for a second. You were saying that the electron knew it was being watched?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The act of measurement, the act of observation, collapsed the wave function. Before it was observed, the electron existed in what's called a superposition. It was arguably, in multiple places at once, a wave of pure potential.
A cloud of maybe?
A cloud of maybe. But the moment a consciousness, or a proxy for consciousness, like a camera or a sensor focused on it, it was forced to choose a state. It became a solid particle at a specific location.
That sounds... Okay, let me try a gaming analogy here because this is how I try to wrap my head around it. It sounds like a video game.
One.
In a massive open-world game, like Grand Theft Auto or Zelda, the computer doesn't render the entire world all at once because that would just crash the processor. It's too much data.
Right, it's just efficient programming.
So the game engine only renders the building or the tree when I turn my character to look at it. If I'm looking north, the south doesn't actually exist as a fully rendered image. It's just code. It's just potential. It's probability.
And when you look,
when I turn around and look, boom, the computer renders the tree. It becomes real because I'm looking.
that is a surprisingly accurate analogy for what's known as the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. The universe is optimizing. It's not bothering to create a reality until it's needed.
And this is where the source draws a direct, bright red line to Hindu philosophy. The source mentions the Sanskrit concept of the drishta.
The drishta.
Define that for us.
Drishta simply means the seer or the observer. And there is this ancient Vedantic maxim that says, drishti shrishtivada.
Okay, that's a mouthful. What does it translate to?
It roughly translates to the creation follows the vision. Or, maybe more directly, the observer creates the scene.
So for thousands of years, this was just a nice philosophical idea. Oh, the world is what you make of it. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We took it all metaphorically. But you're saying the physics is taking this literally.
The physics is suggesting it might be literally true. For centuries, the Western materialist view was that the universe is just a giant machine. It's a clockwork mechanism. It's out there, doing its thing, whether we are here or not.
The old question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound?
Right, and the materialist answer was always, of course it does. In fact, the forest is there whether we exist or not.
But quantum mechanics says, maybe not so much.
Quantum mechanics suggests that without an observer, there is no sound. There might not even be a tree. There is only a wave of probability that could be a tree if someone looks at it. The universe requires a drishta, an observer, to become drishya, the scene.
That is a massive inversion of how we're taught to think. We're taught that matter came first, the Big Bang happened, rocks formed, then some chemical soup formed, then cells, and eventually, way down the line, this happy accident called consciousness popped up in our brains to look at all the rocks.
Exactly.
But the source is arguing the complete opposite. Consciousness is primary. Matter settles into a shape because consciousness is present.
Yes. And the source argues that this strengthens the idea that the universe is not inanimate, dead matter. It implies the universe is, in some way, waiting for us. It's responsive. It is, in a sense, a projection of the observer.
So it's not Descartes, I think, therefore I am. It's more like, I look, therefore it is.
Precisely. And if we just accept that, even tentatively, it completely reframes the question, who am I? If you are the force that collapses the wave function just by looking, you are not just a passive victim of reality.
Like co-creator.
You're a co-creator. You are the fundamental necessary ingredient for the world to exist in a concrete form.
Okay, that is heavy. It gives me a bit of vertigo, to be honest. It suggests we are much more powerful, or at least more integral to the whole process than we usually assume.
It does.
But I want to make sure we aren't just cherry-picking one weird experiment to support a spiritual worldview. The source material goes deeper than just these general principles. It points to the specific people who built this science. And this was the part that really surprised me. Erwin Schrödinger.
A titan of physics.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot talk about the 20th century without him.
Right. The Schrödinger equation is fundamental. It's the basis of everything we've just been talking about. And we all, we joke about his cat being dead and alive at the same time.
The famous thought experiment.
But the source says he was a devout follower of Hindu philosophy, specifically the Upanishads. That feels like something my high school physics teacher forgot to mention.
It is a fact that is often glossed over in standard Western biographies, but it is incredibly well documented. Schrödinger didn't just dabble in this stuff. He was deeply immersed. He kept copies of the Upanishads by his bedside. He read them frequently. He corresponded with other intellectuals about them.
Wow.
The source references his seminal book, What is Life?, which was published in 1944. And it's shot through with these ideas.
So what was he looking for in those texts? I mean, here is a guy doing the hardest math imaginable, describing the fundamental structure of the entire universe. Why would he turn to Sanskrit versus written 2,500 years ago? Was he just looking for some, nice poetry?
No, he definitely wasn't looking for poetry. He was looking for a solution to a problem that his own math created, the problem of multiplicity. He was looking for unity.
Okay, unpack that. The problem of multiplicity.
You see, his equations showed a universe that was deeply entangled, where particles on opposite sides of the universe can be connected instantly. Everything was interconnected. But his daily experience, and our daily experience, is one of separation.
Right. I feel very separate from you right now. I have my coffee, you have yours. I have my thoughts, you have yours. The listener has their own thoughts. We feel like distinct individual bubbles floating around.
That is the experience of the ego. That's the subjective feeling. But Schrödinger, looking at the wave mechanics of the universe, saw that on a fundamental level, everything was interconnected. He couldn't reconcile the math of unity with the feeling of separation.
And he found the answer in the Upanishads.
He did. He famously said, and this is a powerful quote, Consciousness is one, which has the illusion of being divided into many parts.
Consciousness is one. Let's really push on that. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means he aligned himself with the core philosophy of Advaita Vedanta.
Advaita. That means not two, right? Non-duality.
Correct. Advaita posits that there is only one fundamental substance. You can call it Brahman, you can call it consciousness, you can call it the unified field, and everything we see, me, you, this microphone, the listener, the stars, are just temporary waves rising and falling in that one single ocean.
So there isn't my consciousness and your consciousness. There's just consciousness, singular, that is peering through different sets of eyes.
Exactly. I love this analogy. Imagine a city at night. You look out and you see a million light bulbs. They all look separate. They're in different houses on different streets. Some are bright, some are dim.
They all look like individual points of light.
Right. But if you could trace the wiring back from every single one of those bulbs, where would it lead?
To the same power plant, the same grid.
The same grid, the same electricity. Schrödinger believed that we are the light bulbs. We have different glass shapes, different wattages, different colors, but the electricity, the animating consciousness, is singular. There's only one current running through all of us.
And the source says he used this to redefine our sense of identity.
He did. He argued passionately that the thing you call yourself, is not the body. It's not the personality. It's not your history or your job title or your memories.
But what is it if it's not all those things that I think make me me?
It is the canvas upon which all that is painted. The source puts it beautifully. The I is that which observes. We go back to the double slit experiment. The I is the observer that collapses the wave. It's not the biological machine doing the looking. It's the universal consciousness behind the machine that's doing the looking.
It's just so amazing to think that a Nobel Prize-winning physicist was basically preaching non-duality. It really shatters that stereotype of the cold atheist scientist versus the spiritual believer.
It does.
Here, the scientist is the believer, but his belief isn't based on some kind of blind faith. It's based on the direct implications of the mechanics of reality. He didn't find God in church. He found the concept of Brahman in the wave function.
And he wasn't the only one. The source moves us forward in time from the early 20th century to the 1970s to another major figure who bridged this exact gap, Fritjof Capra.
Right, the author of The Tao of Physics. I've seen that book on bookshelves my entire life. It's a classic counterculture text.
It is. And Capra was a high-energy physicist. He was studying particle collisions, literally smashing atoms to see what fell out. The more he studied the subatomic world, the more he started seeing these incredible parallels with Eastern mysticism.
And the source highlights a very specific visual metaphor he used.
Dancing Shiva.
Nataraj, we've all seen that statue. It's Shiva with the four arms balanced on one leg, dancing inside a ring of fire. It's usually in yoga studios or Indian restaurants. I think I might even have a coaster with that image on it somewhere.
It's a ubiquitous piece of iconography.
Right.
But for Capra, and according to our source, it wasn't just some piece of religious art. He saw it as a perfect, intuitive diagram of particle physics.
Okay, how so? How do you get from a multi-armed dancing deity to subatomic particles? That seems like a big leap.
Well, think about what we now know about particles. In the old Newtonian days, we thought atoms were like tiny billiard balls, solid, permanent, just bouncing off each other, the building blocks of reality.
Right, tiny little Legos.
But quantum field theory completely changed that. We now know that particles are not things in that solid sense. They're excitations in a field. They're constantly popping in and out of existence. They're created and destroyed in nanoseconds. It's called vacuum fluctuations. The subatomic world is a continuous, dynamic, chaotic flux.
So it's not a still life painting, it's a movie, a very, very fast movie.
It's a dance. The source explains that the creation and destruction cycle of the particles matches the cosmic dance of Shiva perfectly. In Hindu mythology, Shiva's dance is what creates and destroys the universe. It's the rhythm of existence. The drum in one hand beats the rhythm of creation. The fire in his other hand represents destruction.
And Capra looked at the bubble chamber tracks of particles being born and dying, and he saw that dance.
He saw the dance of Nataraj. He saw this constant cycle of energy transforming. Matter becomes energy. Energy becomes matter. It's never static.
The source emphasizes this shift in understanding, right? That the universe is not a collection of objects.
Exactly. It's a continuous flow of energy. And the source connects this directly to the concept of Shakti.
Shakti meaning power or energy.
Shakti is the dynamic creative force of the universe. In Hindu thought, the entire universe is a manifestation of Shakti, this divine vibrating energy. And now modern physics says the universe is a manifestation of energy fields.
Einstein's E.
Exactly. It tells us that matter is just frozen energy. It's just slowed down light. So whether you call it the dance of Natraj or the interactions of quantum field theory, you are describing the exact same dynamic, flowing reality.
That really changes how I look at that statue. It's not just a religious symbol, it's a physics equation cast in bronze.
Capra certainly thought so. He saw that the ancient seers, through deep meditation, had intuited the same rhythmic nature of reality that he was finding in his complex equations. They felt the rhythm, he calculated it.
So we've looked at the physical universe, the hardware, so to speak. We've talked about particles, energy, the observer. But the source takes a really important turn here. It moves from the outside world to the inside world.
From physics to psychology.
Which is necessary, right?
Yeah.
Because you cannot answer who am I by only looking at the outside world. You have to look at the mind that's doing the looking.
If we are the observer, we need to understand the instrument of observation. And here, the source brings in another giant, Carl Jung.
Another heavy hitter. The founder of analytical psychology. Jung is so fascinating because he was a scientist, a doctor, but he was always willing to go into the mystical weeds. He wasn't afraid of the weird stuff. What's his connection to all this?
Jung was deeply, deeply interested in the structure of the psyche. He broke away from his mentor, Sigmund Freud, partially because he felt Freud was too reductive.
How so?
Freud thought everything came down to our basic biological urges, sex and aggression. That was it. Jung felt there was a deeper spiritual dimension to the human mind that Freud was completely ignoring. And the source notes his strong alignment with Hindu thought, particularly regarding where our thoughts and dreams even come from.
And this is where we get into his famous idea of the collective unconscious, right?
Correct. This is one of Jung's most famous and, I think, most profound contributions. He proposed that underneath your personal subconscious, your specific memories, your childhood trauma, your unique fears, there is a deeper, vaster layer. A collective unconscious that is shared by all human beings across all time.
So it's like a cloud server for humanity.
That is a very modern and very good way to put it, yes. Imagine our individual minds are like laptops. We each have our own files on our personal hard drive. That's our ego, our specific life story. But we are all connected to the internet, the collective unconscious.
And we're all pulling from the same database.
We are all pulling from the same database of archetypes, of deep symbols, of structural myths.
Is that why we find the same stories in cultures that never met each other? You know, like, why does almost every culture have a flood myth or a hero's journey story?
Exactly. Jung argued that these are not coincidences. They arise from the shared, inherited structure of the human mind. We are all dipping into the same well of human experience.
And the source maps this onto ancient concepts, too.
It does. It maps this directly to the Hindu concepts of chitta, which can be translated as the mind stuff or the storehouse of all memory, and Hiranyagarbha.
Hiranyagarbha, what does that mean?
It's often translated as the golden womb, or more simply, the cosmic mind.
The cosmic mind. That sounds massive.
It implies that we are not isolated islands of consciousness. Just like Schrödinger said consciousness is one, Jung is saying the very foundation of our mind is shared. We are part of this massive interconnected mental web.
It's funny because we so often feel so alone inside our own heads. We think, nobody knows what it's like to be me. Nobody could possibly understand my pain.
Right. The ego's story.
But both the quantum physicist and the psychologist are telling us, actually, you are plugged into everything and everyone else. You are fundamentally part of the whole.
It dissolves the ego, doesn't it? The ego is the thing that wants to be special, unique, and separate. It builds walls. But both the science and the spirituality are saying the separation is the illusion. You are just the tip of an iceberg, and the iceberg is shared by everyone.
But there's still a snag here, a big one. Even if we accept that we are all connected, we still have to explain how we are conscious in the first place. I mean, physically. I have a brain, you have a brain. And this brings us to what the source calls the biological mystery.
Ah, yes. Now we enter the domain of neuroscience. This is where the rubber really meets the road for a lot of skeptics.
Absolutely.
Because you can talk about quantum waves and cosmic minds all day long, but at the end of the day, I have this physical brain, and if I drink too much coffee, my consciousness changes. If I get hit on the head, I black out. The link between the meat and the mind seems pretty undeniable.
Right. The standard view, the materialist view, is very straightforward. You have a brain. It's a 3-pound lump of meat inside your skull. Neurons fire, chemicals squirt around, electrical signals zip back and forth, and poof, you have a thought, you have a feeling, you have you.
The brain creates the mind. It's a factory.
It's a generator.
That is the production model of consciousness. It's the dominant theory in science. But the source points out that science is hitting a massive brick wall with this. It references David Chalmers, a famous contemporary philosopher of mind, and what he termed the hard problem of consciousness.
We hear this term a lot in these circles. What exactly is the hard problem? How is it different from an easy problem?
The easy problems, which are actually still very difficult technically, are things like mapping the brain. We can trace which neurons fire when you see the color red. We can see which part of the brain lights up in an fMRI when you feel pain. We are getting very good at correlation. When X happens in the brain, Y happens in the experience.
Okay, so that's the mechanics, the wiring diagram.
Right. The hard problem is explaining why and how any of that physical stuff, that lump of meat, produces the subjective experience of seeing red.
Like, how do you get a feeling out of a neuron? Where does the experience come from?
Exactly. There is no known law of physics or chemistry that explains how objective electrical signals can turn into the subjective personal experience of sadness or joy or the smell of freshly brewed coffee. You could describe the chemistry of love, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin all day long, but that chemical description is not the feeling of love.
If I give you the chemical formula for chocolate, you don't taste chocolate.
Precisely. It's the gap between the map and the territory. And science is just stuck there. We have no idea how matter becomes mind. It's a miracle we just accept. We say it's an emergent property and we wave our hands, but we don't actually know.
And this is where the source introduces an alternative model.
The receiver
The
theory.
receiver theory. This is my favorite analogy in the whole text because it's so clear and intuitive. Break this down for us.
The Hindu philosophical stance, as the source explains it, is that consciousness is not born from the brain. The brain does not produce consciousness any more than a radio produces the music it plays.
Okay, stick with that analogy. The brain is the radio.
Yes. Think about a simple radio in your kitchen. It's playing Mozart. It's playing the news. If you open up the radio, take a screwdriver, and look inside, will you find a tiny orchestra in there? Will you find the news anchor hiding among the transistors?
No, of course not. You'll find wires, chips, and a speaker.
Right. The music is not in the radio. The music is a signal, a radio wave, that is everywhere in the room. It's in the air all around you. The radio is just a receiver. It tunes into that signal and filters it and translates it into sound.
So the radio is necessary to hear the music, but it doesn't create the music.
Exactly. And if you damage the radio, the sound gets distorted. If you smash the radio with a hammer, the sound stops.
But, and this is the absolute key, the radio signal is still there. I didn't destroy the broadcast. I just broke the machine that was playing it.
Precisely. Now, apply that to the brain. The receiver theory suggests that consciousness is a fundamental field-like gravity or electromagnetism that exists everywhere. It is the substrate of the universe.
Wow.
Your brain is a complex biological antenna. It tunes into this universal field and it filters it down into a personal eye. It actually restricts the infinite consciousness into a finite individual experience so you can function in the world.
That changes everything about how we think about death, doesn't it?
It completely flips the script. If the brain produces consciousness, then when the brain dies, you die. The factory shuts down. Lights out. End of story.
It's just over.
But if the brain is just a receiver, when the brain dies, the signal remains. The observer is still there. The music continues, even if that particular instrument is broken.
But is this just wishful thinking? Because it sounds nice, it sounds comforting, but is science actually considering this as a real possibility?
The source notes that Western science is now viewing this ancient idea as a serious scientific possibility, because the producer model just isn't solving the hard problem. We've been trying to prove the brain creates consciousness for over 100 years, and we haven't succeeded.
So they're looking for other options.
So researchers are looking at alternatives. There is a growing interest in theories like panpsychism, which is the idea that consciousness is a fundamental property of matter itself, all the way down to the electron.
It's amazing how we're just circling back to where we started. We started with the observer effect, the idea that consciousness drives the universe. We went to Schrödinger consciousness as one, we went to Jung. Our minds are part of a collective. And now neuroscience is considering that the brain receives a universal signal.
It is all pointing in the exact same direction. It's a convergence, a great convergence.
And that leads us to the final major section of our outline, the Great Convergence. The source makes a really strong, bold statement here. It says that modern theoretical physics is arriving at the exact point where sages like Adi Shankaracharya and Rishi Patanjali stood thousands of years ago.
It creates this beautiful timeline of discovery, if you think about it. You have the ancient rishis in India.
Yeah.
They didn't have particle colliders or radio telescopes. They had the laboratory of the self,
Their own minds.
their own minds. They closed their eyes, they meditated, they went inward, they peeled back the layers of the mind, they quieted the ego. And at the bottom of that inner rabbit hole, they found a fundamental field of pure consciousness. They gave it a name. They called it Brahman.
And then you have the modern scientists.
Who did the opposite? They looked outward. They built a Large Hadron Collider. They built the Hubble Space Telescope. They broke matter down to its smallest possible bits. They looked to the very edges of the universe, and at the bottom of that outer rabbit hole, they found what? A fundamental field of probability. Pure information. A unified field.
So science calls it the unified field, or pure information. Spirituality calls it Brahman.
And the source's ultimate conclusion is that they are talking about the exact same thing. They're just using different vocabularies. The physicist speaks in the language of mathematics, the mystic speaks in the language of metaphor. But the territory they are describing is identical. It is a non-dual, conscious, energetic field that is the source of all reality.
It's like two different teams of people digging a tunnel from opposite sides of a huge mountain. One has a pickaxe, the other has dynamite, but they finally break through and meet in the middle.
That is a perfect metaphor. The vague concept of spirituality is becoming the fundamental field of science. And the source argues that we need to stop seeing them as being in conflict. Spirituality is, in essence, the intuitive experience of what science is now struggling to measure.
So when the source opened with that line, spirituality is clear mathematics, they weren't being poetic, they meant it literally.
I think so. They meant that the structure of reality described by the math matches the structure of reality described by the spirit. The math proves the interconnectivity. The math proves the necessity of the observer. The math proves that matter is just a form of energy. These are ancient spiritual truths.
And this brings us all the way back to the ultimate question we started this whole deep dive with. Who am I?
Right. We strip away all the layers.
If we follow the logic of the source to its conclusion, the answer isn't I am a podcaster, or I am a collection of cells, or I am a person born in the 20th century. Those are all the drisha, the scene, the temporary form.
No. According to this convergence of physics and philosophy, the answer is you are the field. You are the observer. You are that fundamental consciousness that is manifesting as a person for a little while. But your root identity is infinite. You are the universe experiencing itself through your eyes.
That is liberating and also a little terrifying. It feels like a lot of responsibility to be the universe.
Laugh slightly.
It is.
But it also takes the pressure off the small self, doesn't it? If you are the ocean, you don't have to worry so much about being a tiny wave. The wave crashes, it rises and falls, it has a beginning and an end. But the water remains.
I love that. So let's recap this journey, because we have covered a lot of really complex ground.
We certainly have. We started with the observer effect in quantum physics, showing that consciousness appears necessary for reality to take a definite shape. We are co-creators. We saw Schrödinger identifying the unity of all consciousness in the Upanishads. We are all one light from one source. We saw Fritjof Capra connecting the dance of subatomic particles to the dance of Shiva reality is a dynamic flow, not a collection of static things.
Then we saw Carl Jung connecting our individual minds to a shared cosmic mental network.
And finally, we saw neuroscience considering the brain not as a producer of consciousness, but as a receiver for a universal signal that's already there.
And the main takeaway from all our source material today is that spirituality isn't a belief system you just have to blindly accept on faith. It's a science of consciousness that actually predates our labs. It's a description of how things actually work.
Precisely. It validates the human search for meaning, not as some psychological quirk, but as an intuition of the true nature of reality. We search for unity because, on some level, we know we are unity.
So here's the final thought for our listeners, inspired by the source. And this is something to really let simmer. We usually look for answers out there. We look to science to tell us what the world is. We look to religion to tell us who we are. But the source suggests the answer has been looking at us the whole time. Or maybe looking through us.
How do you mean?
Well, if science is identifying pure information, or this fundamental field, as the absolute basis of everything, the building block of the entire universe, and if spirituality identifies that exact same field as you, the true you, the observer behind the eyes, then the scientific answer to who am I is infinite.
It suggests you are not in the universe. The universe is in you.
Exactly. So the next time you look in the mirror, just take a second. Really look into your own eyes and ask yourself, are you looking at a biological machine, a lump of meat that just happens to be thinking, or are you the observer that makes the reflection possible in the first place?
That is the question.
And on that note, we'll leave you to your own observations. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the intersection of science and soul.
See you next time.